Hello and welcome to this webcast. My name is Jonathan Foust. I am delighted you are here. Before we launch, a few announcements. First of all, thank you to Rita Moran, our mindful movement leader. If you'd like to join Rita at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, why am I talking so fast? You can join her on Zoom. And the link for her mindful movement class is on my Facebook page and on my website. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this, and to our producer, Glenn Harrison, for his technical wizardry in cranking this out so you're watching it right now. As well, thank you for your support. This is all offered in the spirit of generosity, no charge, all that good stuff. And because of the generosity of so many, I can afford to do this. So thank you for your support if you feel so inspired. And generosity shows up in lots of different ways. It can also show up as going deeper in your practice, being kind to others. Or if you want to make a cash donation, that's cool too. Finally, no, not finally. Well, pretty close to finally. I have a newsletter which you're welcome to sign up for, a weekly and a monthly or semi-monthly. And that's pretty much it. So why don't we jump into this meditation? And then I'll tell you a little bit about the talk that we've got lined up, all part of this series called Am I Dreaming? How do we wake up from the trance of thinking? So to launch, why don't you take a few moments to adjust your posture, let yourself move a little bit from side to side. You might reach the arms up overhead, stretch up to the left side and the right side, open your jaw wide. And you might, with your eyes closed, let yourself sway a little bit to the left and the right. Letting yourself gently come into a place of stillness. You might just notice by consciously closing your eyes, acknowledging the shift from focus on the outer world to heightening your awareness of the inner world. And you might, if you like, bring your attention to your breathing and consciously slow down your breath. You might breathe in very slow to the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 4. And just continue on your own. Let's say for the next 60 seconds, slow down your breath and notice the effect. Feel the effect on the mind. As the saying goes, the more you slow down, the more you notice. Notice the details of your breath, the length of the inhalation, that pause, the length of the exhalation and the pause. And you might, when you're ready, if you haven't already, release any control of the breath. Let your breath be free flowing. And watch the body breathing all by itself. No particular effort required on your part. We'll explore now what it's like to feel the breath and simultaneously to relax. With the breath as your anchor, could you relax or soften your forehead? Could you relax or soften the right eye, the muscles around the right eye? The muscles around the left eye, and all the muscles of the face, allowing all the micro expressions to melt away. Softening the jaw, letting the jaw just gently fall away from the skull. Could you relax your tongue and just track that sense of deepening relaxation as you relax the tongue, letting it fill your lower jaw, sensing down into the root of the tongue. Feel the weight of the shoulders, the weight of the arms, and you might sense down through the elbows, and down through the wrists, sensing and investigating the volume of the palms and fingers and thumbs. Over the next 3 exhalations, how intimately can you feel and soften the belly as you breathe? Each breath out is softening, letting go. Feel the weight, the length of the legs, down through the knees, and down through the ankles. Feeling the soles of the feet and the heels. Just sensing from the crown of the head down through the soles of the feet, is there anything right now that could soften or relax? And again, feel the breath. Where do you feel the breath on the inside right now? Can you sense in your own way what it means for you to take the seat of the witness, the seat of the observer, noticing what's changing and noticing as well the spontaneous commentary of your mind? And when you wake up lost in a thought bubble, is it possible to smile gently and let it go? To come home again to the breath, home to the here and now. you might explore the following questions. Is there anything in right now that could soften inside? Is there anything that could let go? How intimately can you feel the breath and feel the inner world, this world inside? If you open your awareness 360 degrees, can you sense what's changing? And can you allow that change to unfold all by itself? Is it possible to cultivate these two elements? Deep relaxation and alertness. Over the next minute, you might explore these two questions. What could soften or let go right now? What could soften or let go even more? Sensing the quality of presence right now and sensing what may have shifted for you through these practices of turning inward. And when you're ready, there's no hurry. You can begin your transition. Welcome back. What follows is part 2 of this series called Am I Dreaming? Thoughts on Thinking. In part 1, we explored the power of embodied awareness, how when you are connected to the senses, you are truly here and now. We're going to explore another element in practice, which some find extraordinarily helpful. I find it helpful for myself. Sometimes I find it annoying, but it's worth spending some time on having this tool in your practice. And it's the practice of noting or labeling. When you notice a thought and you can name it, guess what happens? Sometimes you can sever your identification with it and reinforce who you are as open awareness. That's what the following talk is all about. I hope you find it helpful, and so many blessings in your practice and in your life. One of my teachers is the eminent Sri Sri Tony Robbins Das. I started reading his stuff, oh gosh, way back when. He wrote a book called Awakening the Giant Within. And it was like, wow, here's this incredible world of kind of the manual to your nervous system. Highly recommend it if you like that kind of life hacking stuff. But he told us one particular story, which I just thought was great. And I probably won't do the story justice, but from what I recall, the story was a time when he was in business and someone basically shafted him. He felt really betrayed. He was with his executive team, and he was enraged, and he was expressing his rage. Maybe not very skillfully, but he's a very passionate guy. So in his passion, he was expressing his anger and his frustration, his desire for revenge. And he saw that his CFO, who was from Britain, was kind of seemed a little nonplussed. And so he got angry and he turned toward his CFO and he said, "Aren't you enraged? Aren't you enraged? Are you sharing in my frustration at this sense of betrayal?" And the CFO said, "Yes, I'm peeved." And he said, "Peeved? You're peeved?" And he started laughing. To label frustration and anger and revenge as feeling peeved is quite a humorous thing. And he went on to say how when he would get angry, he would start saying, I'm feeling peeved right now." And I would do the same thing, like, well, I'm quite peeved. Now, why am I telling you this story? Well, it's a great story, but it's about noticing an emotion and naming it, and of course reframing it in his case, finding some humor in it. But that sense of the capacity to recognize your internal experience and name it is really, really key in practice. A lot of times I'll find myself really enervated, and I'll label it as nervous. I'm feeling nervous. But then when I really sit with it, I realize, you know what? Nervous is not the right word. I'm actually kind of excited. There's borderline between these different states, and if we don't really pay attention to what we're feeling and kind of name it in a potent way, we kind of miss what's going on. There's the whole cliche how the mind is a wonderful servant and a lousy master. Absolutely true. What I'd like to explore is along these themes of this question we can ask ourselves from time to time: am I dreaming? Like, how do we cut through thinking? So what I'd like to talk about with the time I have, I may run out of time as I often do recently. The first is to remember that you're in a body, to remember that there are techniques to help you come home to the present moment. Foundational. The second is to remember what it means to take the seat of the witness, to be the observer, and in particular, how to label thoughts and how this practice of labeling or noting could be transformative. The third is to remember what it means to take the seat of the witness and label your emotions. Because when you can name emotions from that place of the observer, it opens up new possibilities. And if there's time, I'd like to talk about how you can actually use thoughts in your meditation practice. They're very high quality thoughts. Thoughts of love, gratitude, appreciation, kindness, which are part of the mindfulness practice. So it's an interesting question. When you're lost in the busyness of the day, or when you are feeling reactive, when you're struggling, what would you most want to remember in those moments? Maybe for you, it's to remember to relax, or to trust the process, or maybe to remember to breathe. For me, there's something around presence. Like, what is it that's going to bring me back to presence, to the here and now? Which brings up a question as to why in the world do we even practice in the first place? For some of us, it's stress management. Some of us, we want more creativity, more clarity. Maybe it's around creating real freedom and real happiness in your life. And so often people think meditation is about watching the breath. But if the goal is to cultivate presence, if the goal is to cultivate wakefulness, there are so many doorways. You can do it through conscious movement. You can do it through breath. You can do it through concentration. You can do it through a body scan. You can do it through breathing. You can do it through sound vibrations, through feeling the pulse in your body, through slow motion meditation, through the practice of gratitude, of cultivating compassion, kindness. So many ways that you can cultivate presence. Some of the most powerful are the embodied practices. We talked about this a little bit last time, of how when you take this ADD-HD mind and you can manage to get it absorbed into the here and now of sensation in your body, you arrive. You actually cultivate that sense of presence, maybe just glimpses. But those glimpses can grow into more sustained experiences of here and now, and what can arise from the here and now. So a short little meditation, just a couple of minutes here. And what I'd like to review are just a few things that are really, really helpful. One is the power of slow motion movement in your meditation. One is conscious breathing, and the other is systematic awareness in your body. So this will be just a few minutes. These are kind of go-to techniques for me. But if you would, and don't recommend this if you're driving, bring your palms so they're right about at face level. And if you like, you can close your eyes and let all of your attention flow into your fingers and thumbs, and relax your fingers and relax your thumbs. Imagine the space between the fingers. Imagine the space between your thumbs and your forefingers. And with the hands as your concentration anchor, imagine now if someone was watching you, they could barely perceive movement, and let your hands begin a slow motion descent. And sense, if you can, over the next 30 seconds, what is the smallest unit of movement that you can discern from the inside out? Face expressionless, sensing the micro movements of the hands as they flow through space. Sense, if you can, the effect on the mind. Absorption. Relaxed concentration. And now you might let your hands just rest on your lap or wherever is comfortable. Take a moment to fully relax, and again, just sort of feel, if you can, the imprint. Feel the effect. And now, if you would, take in a long, slow, deep inhalation and hold the breath. And exhale slowly. Inhale now to the count of 4. Hold for the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 6. Inhale to the count of 4. Hold for the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 6. One more round. Inhale to the count of 4. Hold. Exhale to the count of 6. And now relax the breath and feel. Can you feel the imprint or the effect? Now, if you would, just in these remaining minutes, feel your forehead smooth. Feel all expression melting away from your face. And relax your tongue. Feel the volume of your lips. And just sense for a few moments of what it's like to keep your attention in this felt sense of your body. If you like, you can open your eyes, and if you like, you feel free to keep your eyes closed. So we did a slow motion release of the hands. We did some breathing with breath retention and with exhalation, with the exhalation a little bit longer than the inhalation. And then we did just a little bit of sensing, a little bit of body scan on the inside. And what these three things have in common, these three techniques, is they're deeply concentrated, absorbing practices. And chances are, if you were practicing, no guarantee, but chances are that awareness of sensation was more dominant than the thinking process. I find the slow motion practice to be very concentrative, absorbing. When you're paying attention to your breath, when you're sort of counting and holding, again, you're using concentration, but the concentration is on feeling in the body. As a side note, when you exhale longer than the inhalation, it tends to invoke more relaxation. And then anytime you bring your awareness on the inside out, like feeling your tongue, feeling the volume of the lips, again, you become more absorbed in the here and now. It's not so much that we're not thinking thoughts. It's that you are consciously using the felt sense of the body as a way of coming into the here and now. So many techniques. When I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, there was a wandering Swami from the Ananda Marga group who showed up at the Peace Corps hostel, wanting to teach meditation, and he couldn't stay there because he wasn't a Peace Corps volunteer. But they sent him to my house because they knew I meditated. So we hung out for quite a few days, and the guy was amazing. He just wore his dhoti, his cloth, his orange cloth, and he had a briefcase. That was it. And he was around trying to get people organized to practice in the tradition of Ananda Marga. So we're meditating, and he says, "Where do you focus your attention? What do you focus on with your breathing?" And I said, "Well, I generally focus on my nostrils." And he looked at me and said, "Very bad, very bad." You need to focus on your belly. When it comes to the practice of anapanasati, or the breath-based meditation, anapana is breath, sati is remembering. So it's about remembering the breath. And more than remembering the breath, it's about remembering presence, remembering here and now. You have a lot of options if you're not deeply absorbed into Ananda Marga. You can focus on the breath at your nostrils. You can focus on the breath in your belly. You can focus on a sense of the whole body breathing. You can even focus on the breath outside your body, which is a very concentrative practice. Where do you feel the breath outside your body? That is to say, the rim of the nostrils, a little patch of skin. It's very, very powerful techniques that's used for moving deeper into concentration. You can focus on the stillness between the breaths, that moment of utter stillness between the inhalation and the exhalation. I remember Gil Fronsdal, one of the founding teachers of Spirit Rock, on a month-long retreat, leading this very, very detailed awareness of breath, where he was inviting us to feel the breath against the back of the rib cage. If you try that right now, can you feel the lungs against the back of your rib cage? It's very absorbing. So why the breath? Well, it's there all the time. It's free. When you calm your breath, you calm your nervous system. And mostly, I don't know mostly, but it's a cutting through technique. When you are aware, and actually deeply aware and experiencing your breath, you're severing your connection to the train of thought, to the stream of thought. So when Thich Nhat Hanh says, as I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I am aware of breathing out. It's so simple. And yet, every time, it reliably brings me back when I truly feel it and experience it. The body scan is another incredible technique, systematically moving through the body. We talked about this a little bit last time. I think it's an overlooked technique for many people in the insight tradition because, again, when you're sensing, you're not only bringing yourself to the here and now, you're also coming in contact with kind of undigested tensions. Mindful movement, consciously moving your body, so powerful. These are all part of what's considered the first foundation of mindfulness of the body. It all starts in the body. I can go on and on about all this. When you become more awake to the aliveness of here and now in your body, you become more sensitive. You start to feel more. You start to notice more. You start to become more awake. Which brings up the question, what is awake? What is wakefulness? One of the elements of wakefulness is what some traditions call the awakening of the witness. Ajahn Chah, one of the great teachers in the insight tradition, described this as the one who knows. Mindfulness, non-judging awareness. This begins to wake up the more you consciously use the body as a tool for transformation. When I was in the Peace Corps, I taught in a university. I taught phonetics and linguistics, and I had this really, really cool invitation to tutor the Minister of Communications in English. And he was a really cool guy. He was a well-respected leader, and he had been what was called a petit fonctionnaire. That is to say, he had been like a little bureaucrat when he was starting out. And he was paired with a Peace Corps volunteer when he started out. They became fast friends. He was very pro-American. And now he was head of a whole agency, one of the ministers. And so we were chatting back and forth, and he said, let's read something together and talk about it. And you choose. We're gonna choose whatever you want. And I thought, whoa, that sounds cool. He was also one of the kind of Quranic scholars in the country. So I chose Man's Eternal Quest by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's a really, really cool book, but also the English in it is it's clean and solid, and it's a really interesting topic. So we're sort of talking in the book where it's talking about the nature of the mind and meditation. And he goes, okay, so meditation, how is this done? I thought, oh, this is cool. So I guided him into some meditation. And he kind of read this whole book. He didn't read the whole book, but he was reading parts of the book. And at one point, after the meditation, he kind of slapped his thigh and he said, it is impossible to not have thoughts. And this initiated a really interesting conversation around, can we actually stop thinking? Or do we have the possibility of not holding on to thoughts, of watching the thoughts as they go by? Which opened up a very cool conversation around being aware of the thought stream, being aware of the sense stream, being aware of the emotional stream, and opened up another question: what is it that's aware? So, of course, rather than trying to quiet the monkey mind, you can use the mind as part of your practice. And one of the ways to do this is a practice that's either called noting or labeling. Noting or labeling your thoughts. This is at times, very nuanced, at times incredibly frustrating. There are different ways of doing labeling and noting, and I'd like to share some of them with you, and hopefully you might find it helpful in your practice. The idea here, I'm going to yak about this for a couple minutes, and then we'll practice together. From the seat of the witness, from the seat of self-judging, self-observing, non-judging awareness, you label thoughts as they come up. So it might be like when you have a thought, you just say thinking, or just thought. If a strong sensation comes up, you simply note sensation. If a strong emotion comes up, you might just say emotion. If a strong urge comes up, you might say urge. So you can imagine practicing self-observation, non-judging self-observation, noticing what naturally arises, and just noting thought, sensation, emotion, urge. Now, what happens, of course, is you begin to notice just how much you're experiencing in the moment. Another approach, which is a really interesting one, is you kind of say hello. Now, this may not resonate for you, but it's kind of like you're watching the mind and you just say, hello, planning. Hello, frustration. Hello, discomfort. Hello, desire. Hello, worry. Hello, fantasy. Hello, problem solving. Hello, restlessness. The whole kind of panoply of human experience, as those things come into the light of awareness, you just simply say hello. Now, there are a couple things, again, when you say hello, you're simply saying, I see you. And quite often, just seeing something kind of dispels it. In the Tibetan tradition, they say that some thoughts they're kind of self-liberating. It just needs to be seen and poof, it kind of disappears. Sometimes things are a lot more sticky. Now, there's another approach, not to dump too much on you here, but a teacher I highly respect is Shinzen Young. And so what he recommends is that anything that's a memory or planning or fantasy it's an image activity. So you simply say see. Memory, planning, memory. You just use the word see. Anything that has to do with self-talk or imagined conversation, any kind of sonic activity, you say hear. Now here we're sort of narrowing the spectrum to to seeing and hearing. It might be both. So it's one thing to talk about this. It's another to kind of to try it on. So let's try this on. We'll do a little reflection here. So as you're ready, you can close your eyes. And over the next 3 breaths, just notice how much you can relax or soften on the out breath. And imagine what it means for you to take this seat of the witness, to be the observer of everything that changes, and take a moment or two to notice what we might think of as different streams. There's a stream of sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, all the sense doors. There's the stream of emotion, the feeling states, emotional states. There's the stream of thought, the thinking process. And for the next minute, we're going to take 1 minute. Notice, if you can, the distinction between thought, sensation, and emotion. And when any of these might arise, just simply note thought or sensation or emotion. When you can label a thought, there can be the possibility of liberating it, reinforcing who you are as the observer. Now, the next little minute, you can try this little technique of saying hello. If you can say hello and then sort of name whatever it might be, planning, frustration, discomfort, desire, worry, problem solving, restlessness. We'll take 1 minute. Thirty more seconds. And now we'll explore this dynamic of labeling with the words see and hear. Seeing or any awareness of memories, planning, fantasy, any images. And hear has to do with any self-talk or imagined conversation. So it's see, hear, or it might be both. Taking the next minute. 30 seconds more. And now release the technique and just sense if you can relax and just feel any imprint, any residual effect of labeling or noting. And if you like, you can deepen your breath or open your eyes or keep your eyes closed. There's a lot of nuance to this practice of labeling and noting, and I'm aware we're going through it pretty quickly. But when you notice a thought or a sensation or an emotion, just to name its category can be very, very helpful. Or you might explore saying hello. And as I was practicing, I was reminded of and Jerry Seinfeld, with Newman, where he goes, "Hello, Newman. Hello, Jerry." Sort of like, hello, negative self-talk. Again, naming can be helpful. And finally, we touched on to this idea of see and hear, or both. Noting when there's image activity and when there's sonic activity. As in any practice, it can be really, really helpful and it can be really unhelpful at different times. There are times I find that when I just do a little bit of this noting or labeling practice, it really helps to reinforce this idea of the witness, of this non-judging observer. And as they say in the shamanic traditions, when you can name a fear, you begin to take its power away. So this sense of the witness, every time you move from the narrative to the here and now, anytime you move from like discursive thinking to the actual experience of here and now, you're rewiring your brain. You are developing more equanimity, that is to say, steadiness in the midst of change. And equanimity is really considered the flower of this practice. Can you retain a sense of presence no matter what's happening outside of you? So this sense of the witness can be an incredibly positive function in your life. To really identify and see clearly what's happening. Of course, there's a shadow side to it too. It can be kind of cold, of just being the observer without compassion. That's a whole other topic. How do you bring in this clear, objective observation and then bring in compassionate awareness at the same time? But this whole sense of the witness is a factor of mind. And you begin to see how the mind is simply taking all the sensory data and turning it into a story of some kind. Now, for many, many years, I really felt that having a strong witness was the practice. That the more I could be in witness consciousness, if you will, the more I had arrived. But there's a very interesting dynamic here. The more you get to observe without reacting, the more you begin to notice, and the more you begin to feel. This whole metaphor of unpeeling the onion is so apt in this practice. When you're moving from simply maintenance meditation to what I think of as transformational meditation, that is to say, when you're really learning to get comfortable with discomfort, is very much like peeling an onion. You begin to see here's this layer in your conditioning that feels kind of locked in, but the more you look at it, the more you investigate it, the more you bring non-judging awareness to it, the more you recognize the beliefs you're holding around it, things just fall away in this practice. And then the stronger the witness becomes. But what's also interesting is how the work is in many ways kind of never done. Maybe ultimately you're done, but we're always coming in contact with the conditioned self. And sometimes, for those who've practiced for a long time, or maybe even just in your regular practice, you come in contact with conditioning that is kind of pre-verbal, which makes it challenging to kind of stay with difficult experiences, which leads to working with difficult emotion or just labeling emotion itself. A story I've told before, again, I'm harping back to my years in the Peace Corps in West Africa. I had kind of an open house policy, and the only thing I owned of value was this boombox with a bunch of cassette tapes that I kind of picked up over the years. And one fellow staying with me, we just hid the key outside, met some local guys, invited them back. They saw where the key was. These guys came back and they stole my precious boombox, the one thing I valued beyond more than my life was my boombox. And these guys came back and they offered to sell it to me. Now at that time I was studying French, pretty immersed into French. I was kind of beginning to kind of get comfortable with it. And when these guys proposed that they would sell my boombox back to me, I kind of went blind with rage and anger. And I started just reaming out these guys in French, just blasting away in absolute rage. It was so outrageous of them to come back and do this. In the midst of one of my tirades, I thought to myself, you are speaking the best French you've ever spoken right now. And I started laughing because the spell of anger just completely fell apart. Of course, I started laughing and I quickly covered it up because I wanted to know how angry I was. But this is, again, part of this practice of noticing, the power of noticing. As soon as we can name something, quite often we take its power away. When it comes to working with emotions that arise in your practice, it's so important to take this stance of the witness, the observer, and to be able to name what's there. Once working with a very, very successful businessman who had a lot of physical pain, I'll share you the long story. But as we're kind of exploring the physical pain and his stance around it and trying to get a sense of what this was all about, he sort of named that it was, this is just anger, and kind of sat whether he checked back in whether anger was the right word. Did that resonate? And then he just said, this is shame. And he just started crying. And what's so interesting about that moment was when he named what was really going on. As soon as he could name it, it released. The grip released. And with it was tears and insights and all kinds of stuff. So working with emotions becomes so interesting in this practice. To be able to name sad, grief, anger, joy, anxiety, happiness. Naming it kind of gives it room. Sometimes it helps it to shift a little bit. Back to Shinzen Young, he talked about how, in his view, meditation comes down to concentration, which is your capacity to pay attention on purpose. Sensory clarity, that is to say, to really bring awareness to really refining and defining what's actually here in the senses. And the third is equanimity, to allow it, So it's about arriving, feeling what's here, and then giving it space. This idea of taking the seat of the witness and noting and labeling your experience cultivates this sense of a steadiness of presence. Practicing with Tsoknyi Rinpoche, a Tibetan teacher, I had some very, very profound experiences with him, in part due to recognizing and naming what was coming to the surface and giving it space. And I asked him this question. I said, if I do your technique and I keep doing it, what result can I expect? And his response really got me. He said, you can be with anything. You'll know you can be with anything. I thought, wow, that's compelling. And that is the flower of this practice. You can be with anything. You can be with pleasant and make room for pleasant. You can be with unpleasant. You can be with neutral. You can be with what's there, and you can even be with your reaction to that. So this is the power of being able to label what's happening in the emotional body. Now, of course, a lot of this stuff is sticky. You can't just sort of name it and it's gone forever. That just doesn't happen. There's a saying that says that a pure emotion lasts 90 seconds. Like the pure, tangible experience of an emotion lasts 90 seconds tops. I've had some moments when I could recognize it, allow it, investigate it, make room for it, and I would feel the intensity, and it would feel like it was all gone. I've also managed to take some emotions and that string that 90 seconds out to like 50 years. When it comes to noting and labeling, it's really important to know that this practice is not about avoiding anything. It's about being with. And the more you're with whatever's there, the more you will begin to see into the nature of impermanence. The more you'll begin to see how everything changes. When you sit with unpleasant sensation, when you can name it, really name it for what it is, when you can feel it, when you can explore what it's like just to give it space, you will see that the unpleasant sensation over time will change. And it's the same with pleasant. When you experience intense pleasure and you begin to recognize that this too is subject to change, the more you open your capacity for wisdom, the capacity to make room and to be with anything that arises. And that verified faith, that sense of confidence that comes from your practice is absolutely priceless. I'm aware I have been yakking here. I'm out of time. Just about a minute left. So let's take just 1 minute. If you like, you can close your eyes. You might slow down your breath. Sense in your own way what it means for you to take this seat of the witness. Imagine your capacity to move from thinking by turning your attention to the direct experience of sensation. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm aware of breathing out. Sense your capacity to name what's here, to give it a name. Thought, emotion, sensation. To say hello, to welcome whatever arises, and to see into the nature of of reality. Everything changes. Everything born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. Yet there remains the witness, the one who knows. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this was helpful. It's a beautiful way to remember at times to kind of blend this into your practice. So many blessings. Happy trails.